is a season of prophets, a season of waiting and expectation. The call throughout Advent is to prepare the way and to name the truth. And all of the prophets of our Hebrew scriptures, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon the people and gives them power or capacity to do impossible things, like imagine and wait. I have actually messed with the lectionary a little bit this week. The lectionary offered us reading John's version of John the Baptist. But last week, Teresa did such a beautiful job with that story that I decided to instead use this week's offering of the Canticle of Mary, the Magnificat, as our gospel reading. Next week, in a sort of mixed up order of things, we will read the story of the Annunciation. But just so you know, that has just happened. The angel has come to Mary and told her that she will bear God in her body, and immediately she goes to her cousin Elizabeth's house, who is also holding the impossible in her body. More about all of that next week. And then this is what Mary says. This Magnificat is Mary's conversation with her cousin. And yes, for those of you keeping score, this is a long conversation between two named women in the Bible. The reading from Isaiah, we have Isaiah's words speaking to a people who have come back from exile and still not seen the world they longed for. The people of God have come home, but home has been ruined. They came back and they are still grieving. Our psalmist sings that when God's restoration is complete, then our mouths will be full of laughter. We are promised that the way we sow does not guarantee the way we will reap. We are offered the promise that the day of the Lord throughout all of the generations, that the promise is that God will keep disrupting injustice and keep restoring. Those things that look weak and broken are not finished. It is hard because we often believe what we see around us. We see the sick and the hungry. We see the tents battered by rain. We see prisoners getting COVID. We see the mighty looking pretty secure on their thrones, and yet Isaiah and the psalmist and Mary and all the prophets keep saying that the Lord is great and the world is being healed and God is restoring all things. Mary and Isaiah and the psalmist and all the prophets keep saying that God disrupts injustice and that we are invited to join them. We're invited to proclaim with all of them the greatness of the Lord and rejoice in healing. We are called to speak hope and remember the truth of love. This experience of Mary singing this song, it is like a sort of Matryoshka doll situation of justice and liberation. In this moment, God is nested in the body of a woman who is preaching powerfully. God is nested in the body of a woman who preaches powerfully while staying in the household of a loud woman. God is nested in the body of a woman preaching powerfully, staying in the household of a loud woman in the midst of a tradition of people who have held heartbreak and hope next to each other for generations. All of that is held within the story of a people who have always been right up against the beating heart of hope. And it is from this place that Mary preaches. It is from that place that she proclaims the greatness of the Lord. And she doesn't just look back to see all the generations that have come before her. She also looks ahead and sees all of the generations still to come. She looks ahead and she sees us. She sees us name her as blessed, not because of her success in bearing children, but because of her ability to see the truth of God's love in this world. She looks all the way through time and sees us naming her as blessed because she rejoices in God's dismantling of every system of oppression and shame and hunger. We name her as blessed because her response is to preach and proclaim the glory of God. In God's story, all manner of things are repaired, and ancient ruins and ruined cities and former devastations are repaired and made whole and glorious again. The world can look broken and devastated. This world often looks like a place that was planted by weeping people that may never bear fruit. And there are plenty of loud voices in this world that say what is broken should be thrown away. There are plenty of loud voices that say those who are suffering deserve it. There are voices that say that the prisoner is irredeemable, the hungry one is irresponsible, and the captive has been forgotten. There are voices that say you are never good enough, that God is disappointed in you, and that voice is never God. When we believe the stories that that voice says about us and the world, we cannot proclaim the greatness of the Lord. When we believe the stories that that voice tells about us, shame keeps us quiet. There is that voice that says that this devastation has gone too far, that these ruins cannot be fixed, and we may as well make ourselves comfortable with whatever we can grab. But we proclaim a better truth, because God sees things differently than this world does. And God often sees things differently than we do. God sees us differently than we see ourselves. When God looks at ruins, God sees restoration. God looks at prisoners and sees liberty. God looks at the mighty and sees people about to fall down. God looks at the hungry and prepares a feast. God looks at the rich and sees starvation. God looks at devastation and sees promise. And you and I, we are all part of this lineage. We are part of the story of the generations that came before us and include us and keep on going after us. And so, empowered by that and authorized by that, may our souls magnify the Lord. May we sing our own Magnificats, because God is coming. God is coming for us, tender ones. Just because you feel broken right now does not mean that you are not the ones who have come to bless and repair this world. The broken places will be restored, and repair will happen. And so I pray that we may glimpse this world with the eyes of God, who is looking at all of us with love right now. Amen.